Hello, everybody. This is Lawrence from Milwaukee Atheists. And today we have a special guest, and I like to call this guy my friend. I don't know how he feels about me. We got Aron Ra.
How you do, sir? And yes, I would consider you my friend. We took it to a couple of trips together, didn't we? I mean, we were all in Florida.
Yeah. We met at Gateway to Reason.
Yep.
DIP 2015, and a lot of people thought I was your son.
There is a resemblance.
Yeah.
Although you're not quite as big a dick.
Yeah. And then, in Florida, when I was down there, definitely went to go see one of your talks. I was hoping to get you here in Milwaukee, although I understand why you didn't go, and that's totally fine. But definitely would have liked to drink with you. Hopefully, at some point in the future, we can get absolutely hammered.
Yeah. I do like the work that you do on religion and mythicism and stuff. The videos that you make, I like to share those. So it's good work. Just letting you know.
Oh, thank you. That is high praise. That is very high praise, actually. All right. And usually I start off these interviews with asking how the guest became an atheist. So, Aron, how did you become an atheist? Tell us about your journey.
Oh, that it's sad and embarrassing. And a lot of people will be this way, but usually they come from something that everybody else can relate to. I mean, here in the United States, most people are former Christians. Most atheists began as Christians. Few of us were ever always atheist. And in my case, I did the Christian thing briefly as a child, but then when I moved out of that, I didn't go directly into skepticism. I'm sorry to say. I was raised in Southern California, specifically Los Angeles, most of my childhood, and just to put myself in that mindset, man. I want you to think back to like 1970, dude. Okay, so I'm in LA. Back when it's the hippie days, and they're like all about spiritual energy and chakras and transcendental meditation, man. It was huge. Everybody's doing transcendental med. And so I'm all about this kind of spirituality. And I had this whole different view,
Oh, I can't even imagine a chakra loving Aron.
It was, and honestly, the accent was very close to the way I actually talked. And,
that's depressing.
Yeah, when I moved to Texas, in like middle school or whatever, I remember I was listening to an interview with Van Halen, and I was listening to David Lee Roth, and I'm like, dude, I sound exactly like that guy. And then it occurred to me that I sound exactly like that guy. And so I started working on that. Tone that down a little. But the thing is, I bought into a lot of the pseudoscience nonsense that was they used to play these documentaries, that aren't really science, like In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, which is really embarrassing because Leonard Nimoy, everything he said sounded logical, so I'm a little kid. And I'm thinking that I'm watching real science stuff. And they had this one experiment that I thought was so compelling called Kirlian photography. And that's where they take a picture of a leaf. And what you get is this photoelectric plate that shows the leaf in the form of these tiny little phosphorescent blue sparks. And you can see all the veins of the leaf and not just the outline of it, but you can see the interior shape of it as well. And then they cut the leaf in half and took the same picture again. And at first, you only see the half of the leaf that you're expected to see. But then on an overexposure, according to the TV show, the whole leaf resolves. And that, to me, as a 12-year-old boy in Los Angeles in the midst of all of this woo, where I was taught to believe everything. I'm taught that skeptics are cynics who miss out on the big picture that only believers are able to see, and all of that kind of mental conditioning. I thought I was looking at scientific evidence for life force, that that there was actual verifiable substance to that. I didn't know that what I was looking at was a scam. Now, I had some skepticism. I did look into a lot of the things that I'd been led to believe there was scientific evidence for, like psionics, telepathy and telekinesis and astral projection and a number of other things, pyramid power, all of it.
Right.
I mean, I tested all these things as best I could, researched them as best I could, and I noticed that there's probably a reason why all of these things, all of these, like the experiments with the Russians that could manipulate the ball bearings with using the magnetism in their bodies, you see them hovering over the table and motioning in weird ways, and you see these little ball bearings rolling around the table, and this is just because of the magnetics or the telekinetic powers, because they're manipulating these things with their mind. The reason that always happens on the other side of the Iron Curtain, which existed at that time, or in some foreign jungle somewhere, it's always someplace where you can't verify it. And I started noticing that, and so when you try to get anything verifiable anyway, there was nothing. And so one by one, everything that I had been led to believe, not just by the media, which was certainly all about doing that. This was in the days of Weekly World News. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Do you know what Weekly World News is?
I mean, I've definitely heard it before.
Okay, it was a magazine. It was a newspaper. It was billed as a newspaper, and it was really big in the 70s, where they did a lot of stories about Bigfoot sightings and the Loch Ness Monster and all kinds of cryptozoology and government conspiracies and all kinds of paranoid woo.
Isn't that like a website now where people get a bunch of wooey shit?
It is, I think it is, but it used to be a newspaper. It used to be on all the racks.
Oh,
so you go to the grocery store and there's Weekly World News right up there with the Inquirer and so forth. And so this was before the days of Alex Jones and all of that. We had the Weekly World News filling everybody's head with nonsense.
Classic.
Yeah. So I'm being fed all of this misinformation, and I remember people had given me Eric von Daniken's books. I'm like, Chariots of the Gods. Like when I was 12. I'm reading about the Nazca lines and about the and trying to figure out the only two possibilities in this case are either that these are extraterrestrial aliens visiting our planet, or they're time traveling astronauts from the future.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yep, those good old dichotomies.
Oh, and another one that got me quite often was the things about animals encased in stone, where there'd be some story about that there's a 1851 in Paris, they're building a railway tunnel and they're cracked through this rock and a live pterodactyl falls out of the rock. Flaps its wings once, croaks, and dies. Makes a croaking sound and then dies.
Wait,
and then, of course, its body is...
That's not even something I've ever heard of.
And then its body is spirited away to the university where they examine and scientists confirm that it is, in fact, the true story. But you can never find this pterodactyl.
Right.
Yeah, because nobody ever actually documented any. So I'm reading all these stories, and people are bringing me books on this. I mean, and there's just all this empty, assertions that can never be backed up, never be tested. And I had this whole view on spirituality that was way better than what Christians could offer. I mean, I had this idea that. And it's strange. It was dispelled when I went to college to take college courses in biology for science majors, because when you take advanced biology, you suddenly realize that life is not animated the way you used to think it was. I know a lot of people that think that life is animated by a spiritual force. That's the way people always believed it, right? I mean, your body is just a physical components, and then you have to have some magical enchantment, some breath of life that that illuminates it somehow.
Something that makes you special.
Yeah. So what I had was this idea that you have clay, and clay is only malleable when it's wet, right? So that's basically what the life force in a living body is. It's like putting the water into the clay, and now you can shape it and form it and move it around, and then when it dies, the water literally evaporates out of it so that it goes back to the dust whence it came, And what happens to the water that was in it? The water goes back to the hydrosphere. And if you're looking at the way I was, my spirituality was that I wasn't one out of millions of spirits. There is only one spirit. The entire world was a biosphere. You go back to the whole. So, like, imagine you take a glass of water. That's you. That's your soul. Now, you pour that glass of water back into an ocean or a lake. You are now reunited with the one, right? You make me one with everything, the way the Buddhists would put it. And then if you want to be reincarnated, you dump that glass right back in, scoop that water back out. If you do it quickly, you might get some of you, but you're not going to get all of you. It's not going to be all you. You're going to get the reincarnated souls of a bunch of other things too, like moss and gnats and bacteria, everything that's alive. I mean, why would humans have a soul and not anything else? You know, so I mean, trees would have lived the life force just like anything else would. I mean, we saw Kirlian photography had the photograph of the leaf, so we know the leaf has life force. All right, so that means plants have a soul just like we do. And so, I had this vision that when you die, you are reunited with the one, and then when you come back to life, it's not, as I said, it's not necessarily just you. It's not this. It's a recombination thing. So you're going to come back as something very different. You know, someone very different. And it didn't necessarily even have to be in a chronological earthbound history either. It could be, you know, because back then, if you want to, you know, you're too young to remember these, I'm sure, but, you know, back around, you know, 1981, thereabouts, you know, the movie Heavy Metal.
Yeah, definitely too young.
Yeah, so there was this magazine, Heavy Metal magazine, that used to advertise, where she used to have all these science fantasy stories in it, and so this was the way I envisioned my reincarnation. I wasn't just going to come back as an animal or come back as a different person on this planet. It was going to be a completely different world. I'd come back as a completely different thing in different worlds, and it would be like a video game where you're always going up a level, you know, and it was going to be, you know, ever advancing, and it was going to be exciting, and there was going to be adventure and you know, all of that. That my afterlife rocked. It was so much better than what the Christians could offer. Well, you can sit around in a cloud and listen to harp music while you're trapped with this indomitable despot who could read your mind, and you better be thinking nice thoughts. Oh, you always better be thinking nice thoughts, because he knows everything you think, and he's right there, and he can do all terrible things to you. You know, so this is their heaven. Yeah, no, that's not for me. Yeah, my afterlife existence looked more like a Road Warrior movie or something like that. It was great.
Well, that is definitely preferable.
Yeah. Wild, hedonistic, psychedelic, drug-induced, naked teenage heavy metal sex fantasies on wheels. That's my afterlife.
Hell yeah.
So eventually I started looking into the whole Kirlian photography thing that initially set me off, the one lie that really messed me up for my whole life. And at some point, once, you know, the internet existed, I looked into that, and I found where the writers of that show, including Leonard Nimoy himself, admitted that they'd made it all up. That there was no Kirlian photography. There was nothing real to that. It was Kirlian photography is actually real. There are photoelectric plates. You can take the pictures of the leaves. But of course, the staged part was where they merely superimposed a still frame from the whole picture, the whole leaf to the half a leaf. That's it.
Right.
A simple, really
simple Photoshop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I bought. And then I felt like such a fool. I realized that there was actually no reason to believe any of it, anything that I had believed my entire life. And I was like 30-something when I realized this.
Yeah, so
how embarrassing is that?
Yeah, ouch. I mean, glad I'm not in your position.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that reminds me of you know the guy who got famous for going up to news reporters and taking the mic and saying "fuck her right in the pussy."
Yeah, I heard something about that, but I heard that that also wasn't really a thing.
Well, it was all staged.
Okay.
And yeah, I found out of maybe a few months ago that that was all staged, and I got really depressed. Man, my whole life's been a lie. He's one of the original memes.
There was a story that I remember reading about this guy that had a 72 Chevelle, and he had a JATO, jet-assisted takeoff rocket engine that they used to put on these large aircraft on aircraft carriers, because these large aircraft didn't have enough runway on an aircraft carrier to take off, so they literally strapped these huge rockets to it. And so this guy got a hold of one of these rockets somehow, and he was going to put it on his Chevelle and see how fast his Chevelle would go. And so his buddy is a physicist, works out the physics to show him what would happen. The story that I got was that he put the rocket on and did the test, and that they never found any part of his body except teeth.
Oh.
That the car broke the speed of sound off the ground, upside down, and smashed into a mountain 2 miles away at Mach 1. And I thought that was a funny, a sick, twisted sense of humor, funny story.
Right.
This is a Darwin Award special, right?
Right.
But then I happened across a story that revealed that none of that actually happened. That the guy had a friend who was a physicist who worked out what would have happened had he done that. And then he realized he better not do that. But somehow or other, people took that story, and so that it wasn't, this is what would have happened if he'd done it, it became he done it.
Right.
And so this was, this is how urban legends go. And so there's this girl that I was dating once upon a time in Arizona was telling me this story about these people that picked up this child hitchhiking in the middle of the night, and they're driving her home because they found an abandoned child in the middle of nowhere, and they're talking to her and everything as they get to the house, and when they get to the hospital or the police department or wherever it was they were going, they turn in the back seat to tell her, well, we're here, and she's gone. There was never anybody there, and it turns out the little girl was killed in a car wreck. Same story. This girl I'm dating in Arizona said it happened right there. That this event happened in this little road by her house. I run into somebody else from Tennessee, tells me the exact same story, but it took place in their town. But it's the same story. And I mean, how are you even getting this? I mean, how do people spread these kind of tales around? And then they always double down on the verification too. They always want to say, that there's all these witnesses, and they always say there's always witnesses. Supposedly, 50,000 people in Mexico City saw the Mother Teresa, or I'm sorry, not Mother Teresa. What is it? The Madonna, right? They saw appear in the sky. So 50,000 people, all of these witnesses. You never get anything documented. You can't talk to any of these people.
Yeah.
They don't exist, but you always hear, and appeared to many witnesses, just like the zombies in the Bible, the undead saints that appeared before many witnesses who apparently can't write anything down. So I started looking at the way people try to throw out these assertions of conviction in lieu of evidence, because that's what they really want. Is they just want you to believe what they're telling you simply because they're telling you. And then if they start bringing up that there are other witnesses, you're supposed to somehow be satisfied by that. And so then it traces down to like when Jesus talking to Thomas, and he said, well, yeah, you believe because you've got evidence, but blessed is he who has not seen and yet believed. That's what it's all about, believing for no reason.
Yeah, so right after that, I'm assuming you were like, this is just a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good choice. Good choice.
Yeah. And then that launched me into and this happens a lot. I've noticed that when people walk away from the religious perspective, whatever it was, there's an awakening of curiosity. And this is we've noticed this with like the Clergy Project. I know a number of people working with the Clergy Project, and for those who don't know, that is an organization that is a support group for clergymen, for ministers and pastors and so forth, who realize they don't believe their own bullshit anymore. And yet they're stuck in this long-term career where we have to go up the pulpit and still preach things they no longer believe. And what do you do about that? And one of the things that we've noticed behaviorally with a lot of these people is that that there's like a bucket list, where there's a group of items that are always associated with hardcore religion. That you have to hold all of these social and political positions. You have to hold all of these different prejudices. You have to deny climate change. You have to deny evolution. You have to vote Republican. You have to hate gays. All of these sorts of things. But when they walk away from the religion, they find themselves being more tolerant. They find themselves voting differently. They find themselves exploring the issues instead of based on prejudice or what have you. And very often what happens is they end up seeking education. They want to understand the way things really are. And so they start earnestly exploring. And that's what ended up happening with me. The day that I realized I was atheist, I also realized that I had been atheist for 15 years and didn't know it. I identified as an agnostic pagan for Christ.
An agnostic pagan for Christ. That is so interesting. I think I know a witch that's also Catholic.
That's not surprising. I do too.
Oh, do you? Okay, more common than I thought. All right.
Yeah, they're not that far apart, really. Yeah, but it started me exploring, what is agnosticism? What is paganism? What is Christianity? What is any of it? And I was just fortunate at that point, and the internet just came into existence about that time, and so I found myself on Usenet, the news groups. I found myself on alt.talk.creationism, and more importantly, on talk.origins.
Good.
Talk.origins was frequented at that time by John Harshman, P.Z. Myers, Richard Carrier, and a whole bunch of other people that I've come to meet in real life. And so I had a number of experts in science, in theology, and on both sides. I've got these theologians as they bill themselves, and they were able to post these. I was able to throw out a question, and I'll see how the scientists answer, and I'll see how the theologians answer, and they can see each other's answers too. So it was a nice discussion forum. And that started me up. And when people started saying, well, you need to read this or you need to review that, I just took their leads and started doing a whole lot of research. So I invested a really unhealthy amount of my time. Now, I had this job where there's no demands. It was a tech support thing for an ISP. Every call is exactly the same. My screens are not monitored. They don't care what I'm looking at, and I'm doing the same thing all the time, so it doesn't even detract. So all I'm doing is reading. They had unlimited overtime at this job, and so I would be 12 hours a day, very often, just sitting at that screen reading constantly. And then when I was on a night shift, it was even better. No calls came in. I'd get like 2-3 calls from Hawaii, and that'd be all. And I'm all night long, and I'm just reading every day, all day, for 5 or 10 years, and all I'm doing is I'm exploring the arguments that people are coming up with. I'm reading the ancient mythology. I'm reading I'm doing comparative examinations of like the Zend Avesta or the Hadnak Nask versus the Bhagavad Gita and so forth. And that's just all I'm doing for years. And I kind of miss that, actually, because I'm now in a situation where I'm doing this full time. I've achieved that position where I can do my videos and everything, as a living. I work at home, and I do a lot of presentations where people want me to speak someplace or something, and what I miss is being on the learning curve instead of pretending to be learned, because there's a point where I don't have the time to just continue reading and continue doing the research and continue learning more. I actually have to produce something now.
Yeah.
So I kind of miss that. It was wonderful to just absorb for like a decade all this information.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat there, at least for now, because we're making 14 to 16 videos a month, and it's a lot of time, doing the editing and the script writing and the shooting and all that. And
tell me about it. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a hell of a schedule. Luckily, there's 3 people here, so we can divide a workload. But it's still lots of shit to do, and I've been I bought a bunch of books on the history of piracy because I love pirates, and
I hadn't noticed that about you.
Yeah. And like I spent a really, really unhealthy amount of money on these books. I have like 60 books on the history of piracy, and I don't know when exactly I'm gonna get through them all, but at least this way I have source material, and that stuff I always enjoy having. So now you're doing videos full time, and I was never quite clear on this. You do a lot of stuff on biology and evolution, and I fucking love your content on evolution. In fact, I even downloaded a few of your videos just so I can watch when I don't have Wi-Fi, because they're just so good. The one on pterosaurs, are terrible lizards.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like longer ones like that, really enjoyed them.
That was a fun one for me because I love the history of the science.
Yeah.
It's not just the science itself; it's also how they figured it out.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
When you look at people in the early years of this type of study, 200 years ago, there was a lot of prejudices and biases that are not the same as what people experience today. So people were coming from a very different perspective, and just discovering how different that perspective was is bizarre. Like what Sir Richard Owen believed about God's creations of different animals in different lines. He would create like a new model year of animals. Were you aware of this?
I think so, yeah.
Yes, Sir Richard Owen thought that God came out with animals and then that God would improve his designs with practice. I love this idea. And then come up with an updated Mockert model.
Sounds good to me. I'm on board so far.
And this was the leading scientist of his day. He was the authority. And that's what he thought.
And it is fascinating how far science has come.
Yeah, and so all of the prejudices, all of the bigotry, and all of people criticize Darwin for being racist. Darwin was raised in an extremely racist age, but he wasn't the racist that they made him out to be. It was when he made this comment about higher or lower forms of humanity. This notion was throughout anthropology. Period. It was ubiquitous. Every anthropologist referred to people in other forms of life as well in terms of higher or lower. And Darwin was actually one of the first to object to that. But because he's writing in the time, he's writing the way they did. And just know they're reading his stuff. They're not reading everybody else's. So they don't realize that, Darwin has to speak the language these people understand.
Yeah, and people always, they love quote mining. I mean, it's one of the oldest tricks in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And especially I think about, it was the evolution of the eye quote.
Yeah.
That they really like to take out of context. They just stop reading at some point.
They get up to the point where he says, "But reason tells me." Okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't care what reason says.
So because you've been doing, were you like a teacher in biology? Am I understanding that right, or were you?
No, my channel actually became that. We started doing. My wife was a science teacher in public school, and then she became a curriculum specialist with the next generation science standards. So she would start writing scripts for middle school and science school lessons, and this was because of a debate that was supposed to happen between me and Ken Ham.
Ooh.
Yep, which never happened.
Oh.
Ken Ham found a replacement. Ken Ham was challenged by the largest geographic atheist organization, which was the Houston Atheist, 2,200 members at that time. They challenged him to have this debate, and they were going to do it not in Answers in Genesis' own property, where they can, where they make money for it, but they were going to do it in the Houston Museum of Natural Science, and they wanted me to be their champion to debate Ken Ham, and Ham refused. But apparently he got the idea that doing a debate like this would be great publicity, so he found a replacement for me, some guy named Bill Nye.
Oh, you were supposed to do that debate?
Apparently he got the idea from them challenging him to debate me, because they announced the thing with Bill Nye 5-6 months later.
Wow. I would have loved to see you on that stage then.
I would have had a great deal of fun with it, but one of the many things that would have been different about it is that it would not have been on Answers in Genesis home turf. It would have been in the Houston Museum.
Right.
And so, Ken Ham would not have made that scary amount of money from that debate that he did.
Right. All right. So now you are.
What I was going to say, the reason the presentation that I did for when Ken Ham backed out, we still had this audience, we still had the venue. So I gave a presentation where I was talking about what we're supposed to be learning according to the standards for the state of Texas. We're supposed to learn this, and this. And so I start going over all these points, regarding evolution and deep time and the scientific methodologies and everything. And I'm just calling attention that this is an audience full of Texas residents. They all went to school in Texas schools. None of them were taught any of these things that are state requirements. And yet nobody in these schools are learning any of these things. So my wife and I started writing videos that are the state requirements of science, but presenting the lessons properly, because even when a teacher tries to present these lessons, very often we've shown or we've seen that they can blow it really badly. I watched a video where there's a creationist attempting to teach his class evolution one day, and the lesson was beyond embarrassingly stupid.
Oh, that sounds hilarious. I would
Yeah,
pay $1 million to see that video.
It was so awful. And then his class made it even worse, because the teacher, and this is like in Dayton, Tennessee, the teacher says, evolutionists like to be splitters. Creationists like to be lumpers. The hell's that mean? You are not teaching, because you obviously don't know what the hell you're talking about, right? But then the students got even better, because one of the students in Dayton, Tennessee, a glowing white boy, said, how can a black person evolve from a white person? We're different skin.
Holy shit. Holy shit. That is one I have not heard before.
And I thought, give me this classroom for an hour. Let me fix these broken people you've created. Because there was so much wrong with that.
Yeah, obviously that was wow.
So that's what we started doing. We realized that the teachers will very often they'll either ignore the lesson, because Here in Texas, we have students that are trained by their congregations to hear certain keywords and then object. And so they'll disrupt the class. So, and then if you can get past the students, then you got to get past their parents. And then the teachers aren't getting support from the administration either. So we started doing this thing where we do the video lessons, and we have secular homeschool people that'll play these lessons for their kids, or in sometimes they're being played in classrooms as well. This is up to the parents' discretion, but we stick with the next generation science standards. And so this is one of the things we haven't been able to do one in a bit, because my wife is the one that's writing the scripts, and she's also pursuing a master's at the moment. Awkward. Yeah, but we talk about the workload. I'd really like to get back into doing those. It just because this is the way to present these lessons accurately, and then a teacher doesn't have to have a great deal of personal confidence. A lot of times teachers aren't familiar with the lessons until like the day before. They can't certainly be fluent in everything that they're supposed to cover,
right,
especially when there are controversies. And maybe the teacher doesn't want to personally advocate something.
Yeah.
Because this way, that teacher in Dayton who's going to make the attempt to teach what he has absolutely no idea, wouldn't it be better if he just put my video in and then just shut up?
Or just put every video on your channel in your playlist and just go.
Well, at least the ones appropriate for classrooms.
Right. Yeah. So it's really fascinating because now. Your stuff is being shown in schools, and you are working on a project, the Phylogeny Project. Now, when I was in Florida, that was the talk that you presented, and it was fascinating. Like, so to my understanding, phylogeny is just a better way to classify life, or.
Yeah, the old word is taxonomy, and it's what Carolus Linnaeus invented. It was the systematic classification of life, putting life into the different categories. These animals have fur, they give live birth. These animals, have scales, whatever. This is how it started, dividing animals from plants, dividing animals with backbones from animals with 6 legs, things like that. And so Linnaeus had accidentally discovered this tree of life, believing that everything was created. He thought that everything was created at the same time, but he had these levels of hierarchy where there would be like a lineage of descendant daughter groups within ancestral sets, which doesn't make any sense from a creationist perspective. And he had no idea. He believed that species were immutable, that it would be impossible to create a new species. So he's got no explanation for the pattern that he's revealing. But it is a tree of life that he happened across just by classifying life according to these common traits. And he didn't have, his system obviously didn't allow for evolution. So it's got some flaws built into it. And what they ended up doing was they tried diligently to work with his system for like 300 years. And with being able to map entire genomes now with computers, it means that we can use the genetics as kind of like a paternity test to verify exactly where certain things go. You may classify things by their physical characteristics, but occasionally you can get something wrong. Like, anteaters and aardvarks and pangolins were all classified in the same group together because none of them had teeth, and so it was assumed that they'd all lost their teeth in some common ancestor. No, each of these was a different group that lost their teeth independently. And so the genome comes back and shows you exactly where each of these go. And so that's the twin nested hierarchy. You classify something by its morphology, by its physical characteristics, and then you run its genome, and that'll tell you whether you got it right. And the genome is the big confirmation. So now it's twin nested. It goes both ways.
Okay, so usually on Wikipedia you see like the taxonomy of some species.
And they still use that genus, class, family.
Yeah,
that's outdated.
Is it okay? Because that is what I learned in high school in biology.
Yeah, that needs to go away. The new system, we use the 7 taxonomic grades that Linnaeus came up with, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, and so forth. These things that he invented don't really apply. Instead of being 7 grades, there might be, that we can distinguish in a cladogram, 30 to 60 in one, and then not in the one next to it. So it's going to be variable. So I mean, his system just doesn't work. Instead, we go with clades, and a clade is any grouping of animals that includes all of its descendants. So if we have a clade for mammals, for example, then that's going to include every type of mammal, and then within the subset of that, you have the groups that are marsupials, or they're placental or monotreme, and then that'll include all of those. So you never evolve out of your ancestry if that's the actual clade name.
Okay, so under this, would birds still technically be dinosaurs?
Yes.
Okay.
Birds are literally dinosaurs.
Good.
So in the same sense that mallards are a subset of ducks, and ducks are a subset of birds, birds are a subset of dinosaurs.
All right. So and I remember during the talk, you had this you had to take screenshots, I think, of the actual project that you guys are working on, and it's this huge tree of life type thing.
Yeah, we've had I don't want to say a couple dozen volunteers, at least a dozen of them, been working diligently for at least 2 years now. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 species. The last count was something like 26,000 that somebody had actually worked up, that had been entered in on 150 clades, and that was months ago. We found, I've been petitioning for support for this project for a long time, and we finally got an entrepreneur that said that this is something that needs to happen, and so there's been a whole lot of money invested in a database engineer to produce this thing. And the first one that was built was by a guy in London, and it looked really nice, but when we started putting data into it, it wasn't long before it collapsed. So we needed a system that was strong enough to hold all of this information, and then the information has to be correctable. If we get a genome back that says, hey, aardvarks aren't really with anteaters, they're more with Afrotherians, you're going to have to move it. So I need to be able to move not just the end species, I need to be able to move the entire clade, all of its descendants at once together. And and so we've got a system where we can do that. And so we have what the intent of it is to make a navigable online encyclopedia of the entire tree of life, so that eventually, when you click on any given clade, you click on let's say mammal again, just for the fun of it. I mean, it'll give you the criteria of what a mammal is, what the value of that clade means, and there's hundreds of other clade names I could have come up with, but people are not going to know what any of that means. Yeah. So, people have an issue. I noticed, we can detect patterns, but a lot of people can't seem to tell the difference between the word mammal and the word animal, and so it's a weird thing that they think that that snakes are not animals, or things. Snakes are not animals because they think the word mammal applies, or that an insect is not an animal because they think the word mammal is there. The words are just vaguely similar.
Right. I think. I personally don't know people who don't think snakes aren't animals, but I think people are.
My son's science teachers, 2 of them. One of them classified snakes as invertebrates because they thought they were so wiggly they couldn't have backbones.
Wait, but that's pretty much all they have is a backbone and a jaw, and then some ribs.
Well, what do you want from a Texas school? and another one classified cockroaches as vertebrates. Not because he thought cockroaches have backbones, but because he didn't know what the hell a vertebrate is. So he thought the word vertebrate meant animal.
Oh dear.
If these are the teachers for our students here, then we obviously we have an educational opportunity to present here. So we've got this this database where you can start from, like, the most basic forms of life and follow the route. Now, it's going to be difficult for people to understand because there's a lot of big words and there are a lot of unfamiliar words for most of these clade names, and it is way intricate. The tree of life is so much bigger, and not just in the end species. There are so many divisions in it that people don't realize how the amazing complexity of the tree of life, all of the different divisions, all the different side branches. And people just have the idea that that there's like 5 categories or something, and then you end up in the million species at the end. It doesn't work that way. So we're trying to show the value of the individual clades and what does that clade mean? What does it mean to be a mammal? What does it mean to be an animal, for example? And there's lots and lots of intergroups in between. So that what we're showing is almost entirely transitional species. So when people say, well, where are the transitional species? Oh, pretty much everything you click on.
Yeah.
Not everything. I don't use the I don't use the cheap definition where anything is a transitional species. I use the strictest definition there is for that word, and it still applies to virtually everything in the tree. So everything we click on is going to be transitional from this point to this point, and you can see where those 2 points are right there in the tree.
Yeah, and I was blown away at how in-depth this was. It just looked so crazy, like it's such a huge undertaking. But I am so glad that it's being done. Like, if I knew more about biology, I would help, but I just don't. Like,
well, anybody wants to see it. We don't have a landing page yet. We've got a database engineer we finally got the database working, and it's strong. And now he's working on giving us a landing page. That's supposed to happen sometime in October, but I keep getting promised that I'm going to be in touch with this guy shortly, but there's communication issues. He's in Greece, and they're like intermittent connections for whatever reason. The way that this guy works, and as long as he produces, it's fine. But we're just trying to stay on top of it and put something together. In the interim, or in the meantime, anybody that wants to see what this database looks like at this moment, anyway, what the back end of it looks like, I screenshot a lot of these and put them in a video series called the Systematic Classification of Life. And right now, I'm working on human ancestry, starting from the earliest on up, and I think we're about to move into like the bony fish stage. Just to give at this point that this interview was being done, that's about where I am in that, and so that I think we're like 8 or 9 videos into it, just showing how the formation of life in the different type of classifications. What we would like to do is like to have, for people who don't know the meanings of the words that they're looking and are therefore easily lost in a tree like this, because it is so easy to get lost.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, I know I would get lost in that pretty quick.
Yeah, we're going to be putting some illustrations in, so when you highlight over any given clade, you're going to see what an example of that clade. And a lot of people will want to use end node species, like dogs or birds or whatever. And the problem is you can use a dog to example a mammal and a vertebrate and a carnivore and several other different things. So why would we do something that's that's advanced and modern? We want to show what is the very earliest example we know. So you're going to be this way. It's all transitional species. Everything that you see. This is the first occurrence. So instead of if I get into early carnivora and I get on the dog side of the carnivore family tree, I'm not going to be showing a dog as an example of that. I'm going to be showing a myosid, which is what came before dogs in this lineage.
And I think that's so important. Because like as you said before, people just get confused. Now, are you having like somebody do these drawings personally, like a sketch? Or?
Well, as far as the artwork goes, we're just starting into that. I'm trying to get. We're not doing drawings at all. There are people that are artists, and they're welcome to do that. But what I'm looking for is people who are already paleo artists, who already have renderings of various things. I mean, if you've got a good depiction of a mysid, can I use it?
Right.
Put it here. I'm not asking people to draw what these animals are, but I do want. And there's a lot of good artists on like DeviantArt and things like that. But the problem is that a lot of these people aren't being faithful to the actual fossil, and that's another important thing. I've seen renderings of paleofauna that I can look at the picture and I can look at the fossil and I can tell that's not accurate.
Right.
So I mean, we do need to focus on that. But I want people to just find the art. Here's the image. This will suit here. This will tell people what this is. Okay, well, we'll include that. And then in addition to that, like when you click on any of these different clades, Anthracosauria, for example, you're going to get a description of what an anthrocosaur is, what are the criteria to belong to this clade. Here's the earliest fossil. Here's an image of the earliest fossil of it. Here's a depiction of what this animal should have looked like in life from what we can tell from the fossil. Here's this encyclopedia of information. Here's the scientists that worked on it. Here's the peer-reviewed references. Ultimately, eventually, we want that. Right now, we don't have that. Right now, when you look at anything that's in the tree, they're almost all empty boxes. It's just the name of what goes there. And then at some point later, will come in and flesh out or add color to all of these things in the way that I'm describing. Right now, the goal is for these dozen or so people for the last 2 years is just to build a robust database that you can actually navigate where things are, where they're supposed to be. And that's been a great trick, because sometimes you'll get discrepancies. And sometimes it's because of the transition from phylogenetics, from cladistic phylogenetics, from taxonomy, the old-fashioned Linnaean grades of taxonomy, because they don't always match things. And then there's sometimes I've noticed, even I'm working with people that are, some of them are paleo students, some of them have some proficiency in science, some in becoming academics or whatever, but a lot of them are just interested. So we're going to call them autodidacts or volunteers. So I'm very careful about the information that they put in. We've got all kinds of securities on how this information is entered. We know exactly who entered what. We can make the corrections necessary. We have ways of identifying the corrections. When we're building these trees, people may start with a cladogram that they can easily access on like Wikipedia or something like that. And then they will look at the peer-reviewed citations at the bottom, and then they start cross-referencing that with other research. And what we usually see is we find more recent documentation than Wikipedia has, and it'll be more comprehensive. And so we obviously switch over to that. And what we want to do eventually, as I said, when we flesh this all out, is we want to turn this over to the scientific community. We want the scientists themselves building their own cladograms in our system and maintaining it on their own. So we will have people, putting in the artwork, putting in the descriptions, and then we're going to have the scientists will be putting in their own citations and so forth, making their corrections or whatever. And we would like to turn this whole thing over to, say, a university to host it. Because right now I can't reveal it to the public, even if I had a landing page, because the weight of the server space is inadequate to do that. So I was talking to a university recently who said, yeah, we can host your site for you. And then I began to describe what it is. And then they stopped and they said, no, we can't handle that.
Wow.
They said, our university is too small for this website.
Yes, it's got to be a big, important university.
Yeah, so it's hard to petition these people without. Right now, I mean, all I've got is, if you want to see it, you have to go to this private site and then create a login to be approved, and then you can navigate as a data entry person. You can see it, so you're only able to see the back end. And I don't know anything about web design at all. I don't even know if I'm using the right words.
No, you are. Don't worry.
Well, thank you. What we want to do is when I actually have a website, that I can, a landing page. We'll have like this beta address for this landing page, and then I'll be able to just send that to the different university administrators or organizations, because there's a number of different science organizations that might be interested in this. I mean, I'm hoping that either the Dawkins Foundation or Lawrence Krauss's Origins Project, either one of them might be interested. And something like Cambridge or somebody like that would be brilliant if one of them could take it. But somebody eventually is going to host this thing.
Yeah.
And the only way I'm going to be able to do that is by sending this web page and say, hey, would you take a look at this? Look at what we've done. And this will be before it's before the color will not be added. All of the illustrations that we were talking about, the paleo art depictions, and most of the there's going to be very little of the encyclopedia there. But the tree is there, and the tree is the trick. Because it's relatively trivial once you know the name, of a particular clade. To go look that clade up, you'll know what that is. You can get that on a number of different sources. But knowing the location of it and being able to see the relationship between this one and the other things next to it, that's the issue.
Yeah. So I really hope someone picks that up. You might try UWM, the Madison one, UW-Madison. They have an amazing biology department, so they might be able to do it. But
okay.
I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of like what they're known for, is their biology department. Just a suggestion. But
well, that sounds like a good idea, and that sounds like it would be a good school to do it in. Just basically anybody that can look at the landing page and realize what it is we're talking about. In the landing page, for example, this is based largely on a previous effort called the Arizona Tree of Life Project, which you can Google this. It still exists. And it was also called the TOL website, TOL web. The thing is that the Arizona Tree of Life Project is the best cladogram ever created online, and it ran out of funding 17 years ago, before they even mapped the human genome. So it was a peer-reviewed resource like ours will be, and it was being updated and so forth, but it obviously, when they ran out of funding, that stopped. And so we're 17 years behind on getting a replacement for that could do as well as it did.
Right.
And where was I going with that? Oh, yes, we want this to be a tool not just for curiosity. I mean, this is for teachers, this is for students, this is for the scientists themselves.
Yeah, and I bet it's going to be super fucking helpful too. So do you have like I don't know if you have like a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter, or I don't know.
We haven't worked out how to do that yet.
Okay.
Because we're hoping that within the next 2 weeks, as I said, we'll have a landing page to show people, and it'll be something similar to what the Arizona Tree of Life Project landing page is, but with a couple of additions. Our cladogram works a lot differently than the TOL website because ours is a living entity. It can be constantly updated, improved, and built upon, where that one did not. Once it was printed, and it was pretty much done. And then we're also going to have there's going to be discussion boards and things like that, so that people can argue.
Yeah, I mean, that's always fun.
Yeah. I mean, but it'll be a huge interactive thing, and this is the purpose for it. Of course, is to be educational. It's an educational tool, but it's also going to be used by the scientists. There was another website called Paleos.com, which was at one point it was a handful of autodidacts that produced this webpage that described different forms of life in different geologic periods, but their information was so voluminous, so encyclopedic, and a lot of the stuff that they had on the various different species was information that you couldn't find anywhere else because everything was on the other side of a science paywall. You had to be a member of a university or whatever. You had to be on somebody's science team in order to even view this information at all. So these people had put this massive amount of information on this other website, which was a beautiful website, absolutely. And they ran out of funding as well. And so obviously we realize that funding is a problem, and so we are trying not to have the same weaknesses that other attempts succumbed to. And now the Paleos is coming back. They're putting their stuff back up online. A lot of it's becoming more robust again. It's becoming like what it used to be, and it was being used by the scientific community, the paleontological community specifically. And the Paleos creative team is now connected to the Phylogeny Explorer project. They're working with us.
That's awesome. That's great.
So our websites are going to be integrated, and so we're looking for hosting space really for both of us, and because they were already being used by the scientific community as a resource tool, and that of course is the goal for ours as well. And I thought that the best thing that could happen would be for Wikipedia to take this on.
Yeah, it'd be great for them.
Because Wikipedia has, this is a funny thing, building this website, we've been able to compare a lot of the data that Wikipedia has and find an awful lot of holes in it. Wikipedia has for any number of things that you might look up. Once we mentioned before, about mammals or carnivore or whatever, any of the clades that you're going to look at, you're going to find discrepancies between just within Wikipedia pages, and sometimes they're Linnaean and sometimes they're cladistic, and there's how do you mesh these together? It would be a lot better for Wikipedia to just connect themselves with us.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree.
So, I mean, the best goal, and I've actually talked to people at Wikipedia, but I can't get them to, so far haven't been able to convince people to say, hey, this is the thing we ought to be doing.
I mean, hopefully they change their minds soon.
Instead of a handful of discordant databases, how about one that works with everything?
Yeah, exactly. That would be fucking great. So we are running out of time, but I want to give you a moment for some shameless plugs.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
As I said, I do this, the activism, all the things that I do full time now. I need all the support I can get. Of course, I'm supported by Patreon. That is patreon.com/ARONRA. And I can use all the $1 subscribers that I can get. Yeah, because this is not a huge amount of money, but I make just barely enough as it is that I can do this and that I can be useful. I had a job for 14 years in a corporate office that, while it started out very productively, it devolved into this. Basically, you remember the movie from The Incredibles? Remember Mr. Incredible's job in the insurance office where he denies the little ladies their coverage?
Yeah.
That's where I was. That scene in that movie was painfully familiar. And if I hadn't been able to get onto Patreon, and I wouldn't have been able to do anything for the movement, nothing for science, none of the activism, none of the politics, nothing. I would have been in that job denying little old ladies their insurance coverage, and that's all I would be able to do.
Right, I'm very happy you're doing this now. Yeah,
and I'm obviously delighted that things are the way they are. So please support my work if you are happy with it at all. And I make 6 videos a month. Can you afford $6 a month?
Yeah, and if I don't know who in my audience hasn't heard of you. I mean, I have not even 2,500 or 2,500 subscribers. Really, really small amount. But if anyone in my audience hasn't heard of Aron, they need to go on his channel and click that subscribe button and just fucking watch everything. Because he's fucking awesome.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. So that's all the time for the show. For the viewer, thank you for sticking around. And if you like our work, our mediocre videos, definitely check us out on Patreon. Check out our website. We have a forum. You can leave your ideas on what videos you want us to make. And definitely check out our other content. Thank you, and we will see you later.